So Kathryn and Kerry, welcome and thank you very much for your time this evening. So without further ado, let me hand over to you. I will share the screen. Would you like to introduce yourselves first, and then let me know what to do?
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Kerry, you introduce yourself first and then I'll go into my
Okay, good afternoon, good evening everybody. My name is Kerry Bailey. I'm an international trade advisor, mainly working in Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire through D2N2 and via the local growth hub. And you'll hear from me later.
Thank you, Kerry. I'm Kathryn Borg. I'm also an international trade advisor. I work with the East Midlands, but my area is the Peak District, going down to Chesterfield and as far north as Glossop. So those are where all my companies are that I work with. And now Robin can set up the presentation. I can tell you what Department of International Trade can do for you. Okay, thank you. Fantastic. Thanks a lot. So if I was in front of you physically, I would ask you to put your hand up and say, have you worked with the Department of Trade before, and do you have an international trade advisor? But I can't do that. So I'm going to go on and tell you all about it. And if you already work with us, fantastic. You'll hear a lot of things you know, maybe a few things you don't know. And if you haven't heard about us, then absolutely excellent, because you're going to learn of a great service that is available to all of you as a company that can help you export and find business in different countries. So international trade advisor, bit of a mouthful. So I'm an ITA. So when I'm referring to ITAs in future, that's what we are. And we are generalists or we're specialists. So that means, for example, I'm a specialist in global sports. So anything to do with sporting events around the world, I get involved in. So the Olympics, the Winter Olympics, Pan American Games, you name it. I also have 2 country specializations, Libya and Malta. And again, our trade advisors cover food and drink, construction, different countries around the world. We all have a specialization. And that's great, because if I need something about Brazil, I can go and pull on somebody who knows bits about Brazil. And likewise, if they want to come to me about sports, I've got contacts in sports. So this is the sort of the agenda for my presentation, but there are some things that I'm going to talk about in detail. Others will come forward with the presentation. The market selection exercise is something I would do when I met a company and they said to me, what market shall I sell in? Or they might say to me, like a chap did recently, I'd like to sell in the Caribbean. And I said, really? Why is that then? And he said, well, you're just a nice warm country. So I said, yes, but your product won't sell in the Caribbean. So, you know, there's no point in putting a stick in a map and saying, oh, I think we'll go and sell there. So that's the point of the market selection exercise. It's to bring my colleague in, who is a specialist in research and statistics, and to go through a whole exercise of saying which countries need your product and which countries are we absolutely wasting our time even attempting to sell it in. So that's a really good exercise, and well, we do it quite often. Export opportunities I'm going to come to later. So I'm going to come to e-exporting later, and OMIS. Trade missions, well, they're virtual now. I mean, I've done a lot of trade missions in the past, and I absolutely love doing trade missions because I did Libya in 2013 and we did £2.5 million worth of business. We won't be doing Libya at the moment. We won't be doing anywhere at the moment, but there is such a lot of business to be got through trade missions. However, we are doing them virtually now, and these are, you know, they're really doing well. So we're learning a lot after this pandemic, how to do virtual business. Again, events and seminars, all virtual now. And our masterclasses and webinars have been really well attended, especially after the transition, where we've had experts talking about your VAT problems and your export problems in terms of logistics. So they're all virtual. In the time of when we could ship people places, we were able to send you a postgraduate from various universities. And if you had, for example, a project in China, which one of my clients did, and they needed a Chinese postgraduate, I was able to get a postgraduate from Nottingham University, and she did some work with them for a few months to help them with this project. UKEF I will talk about later. And now on to my baby, if you like. This is my specialisation. When I meet a company and they say to me, I want to export, the first thing I do is look at their company website. And I'm sorry to say, maybe 8 times out of 10, I go back and say, not internationalised. And remember, your website is the window to the world. So if you're hoping to trade globally and you've got a website that really isn't up to scratch, then we need to change it. And one of the things is having an international tab. One of the other things is having some languages on, because if you decide that there are markets that you want to target, then maybe on that international tab, we have a drop-down menu with some, maybe 3 languages. And each of those pages is in German, for example, explaining all about the company with the right SEO in, the SEO in German, the search engine optimization in German, so that when they're searching on Google, they will find your website. So the internationalization of a website, I cannot stress enough, and I could do a whole presentation on that. So I'm not going on any further, but happy to answer questions later on if you've got anything you want to ask about how you internationalize a website. Robin, can I have the next slide, please? This slide really is just showing you the extent of our service. So we cover England and we cover it regionally in 9 regional contracts, 7 delivery partners. So in total, you've got 275 international trade advisors helping the whole of England to export, because that's our aim. We help you to export. We don't cover Scotland. They have their own sort of organisation up there, but we do work with them. And Wales and Ireland similarly have their own organisation. But that just shows you how we are able to help all regions in England look forward to exporting. Next slide, please. So as an ITA, when I'm working with companies, I'm there to give you impartial advice and support. And that support covers everything. It's not only export. And certainly in this last 18 months, I've had to learn skills I didn't think I'd need. So throughout the pandemic, we were helping people find funding, keep going. And going back to my website baby, the people who had good websites are the ones who kept going. The people who had no websites or websites that were rubbish, they're the ones who've gone downhill fast. So we will give you export related business advice. As I said already, we'll look at research. We can help in identifying partners and potential customers around the world. And again, I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail later on. But the whole aim of an ITA working with you is that you have a consultant that you don't have to pay for. I'm the business consultant working with you. You don't have to pay me. I did a presentation a few weeks ago where even in the question and answers, the guy at the end said, and what do you cost? Well, we don't cost anything. We're free. So, you know, we will come and work with you and give you the best advice we can and pull on what is a fantastic network throughout the world of offices where DIT is available. We've got their support during market visits. Well, that's there because we will give that support. Obviously, we're not doing them now. And more importantly, we identify export opportunities with the aim of increasing your turnover. So the whole point of working with us, at the end of the day, you've got a better turnover than you had before you started working with us. Because also, England is very good for business, but the world is bigger. And so if you spread your wings, you're going to get more money coming in because you're exporting around the world. Thank you, Robin. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the exporting programme, and if you look at the red points down at the bottom to start with, in 2020, 87% of UK households made online purchases. Well, that's not surprising. You couldn't get out, so you had to buy things from somewhere. However, I doubt that's going to drop tremendously because I think we're all getting into this mode of buying online. So companies who are doing e-commerce have done well. We are the 3rd largest market. It's worth a lot of money. The largest market, of course, is China. We would all expect that because they do everything online. But it's interesting how fast it grew in 2020. And as it is, it was a mature market anyway, and for it to grow even more, if that doesn't say to a prospective company who is thinking about exporting, should I be doing e-exporting, then, you know, if you have a product you can e-export, then do it. Admittedly, a lot of my manufacturing companies, my big machine companies, they can't e-export, but there's also ways of e-exporting information. So this is really important. Now, we know it's important, so we have a really good team with us in the East Midlands of digital trade advisors. And your ITA can arrange a virtual meeting if you want to discuss your website, or if you might want to discuss how you can broaden your e-exporting program. So as you can see there, you've got all the marketplaces where you do e-exporting. Mercado Libre, you might not have heard of because it's Latin America. Alibaba, Tmall, all China. Amazon, of course, which everybody's heard of. And then there's Channel Advisor, which I once got in for one of my clients who wanted to extend his spread. Channel Advisor costs a lot of money, but he'd made that money back in the first year because they got him so many contacts around the world, and his e-exporting went up tremendously that he'd made that cost back. So we have a really good support network now with e-exporting, and your ITA would be happy to help you grow your brands, if you like, around the world. Next slide, please, Robin. OMIS, Overseas Market Introduction Service, my favorite, and Robin's, I think, as well. So I'll give you an example of an OMIS before I talk about it. I had a company who wanted to get into Russia. They were in the oil and gas business, and they were a small SME. So nobody who spoke Russian, no way of contacting anybody in Russia, but they knew their product would be good in that environment. So I contacted my colleague in Moscow, who was the oil and gas expert. That was her specialization. Olga, she was called. And I set up a telephone conversation between Olga, myself, and my client, Richard. And the main aim of this was to get some sort of contact going on, get him to trust her, get her to ask questions. And we had a really good conversation. And she knew exactly what needed to be done with his product. So she did, though, say, you need to get in your website some Russian. So we needed an international tab, drop-down menu, and then some text in Russian about the company, so that when she started recommending him, they could go in there and they could read about it in their own language. She also asked for some Russian marketing collateral that she could send out. Now, the whole aim of this was that she would make contact in Russian from the British Embassy in Russia to say, I have this company in England who do this, and this. Would you be interested in talking to them? And that was her job. So she sent a work plan and a cost, because out of all our services, this is probably the one that will cost you money. We don't ask for money for nearly all of our services, but this one will cost money. And that's mainly because of the work that goes into it. So Richard read the work plan, agreed the cost, and paid it. And Olga then took about 8 weeks to come back to us with a report. The report was very extensive. At the back was a list of companies that weren't interested. Now you might think, why am I starting with that? Because actually that would make a fantastic database. Richard didn't realize this, but I said, get that into a database. Let's get the company that I introduced you to do the translations, to do a newsletter once a year in Russian. Send it off to them and they'll remember you. Now, moving to the front of the report, which was even more important, we had 9 warmed up leads. Now, I call them warmed up leads because they were ready and waiting to speak to Richard. Olga had explained all about the company. They'd seen all the information. And basically, all Richard had to do was hop on a plane, go over to Russia, and Olga would arrange meeting all these people. So that's my example. You can get the idea. It's a bespoke support. from DIT to whichever market we think will be interested in your company. And the assistance now doesn't only come from DIT, it comes from chambers of commerce, it can come from third-party companies as well, but the essential work is the same. We are aiming to do the work in that market, that country, to get you contacts for you to go in there and meet them and say, this is my product, what can we do? So I love the OMIS. It's a fantastic way of doing business, and it really does saves you time. I tell you what else it does as well. It'll tell you if there's no business going there, because I did know one company who they did it and they were happy to do it, but the result that came back was, you know what, your product isn't going to sell in this country. And the guy said, I'm really happy because it saved me going over there, wasting money, when now I'll concentrate somewhere else. So that's, as I say, very good service from us. Robin, can I have the next slide, please? UK Export Finance. I'm not sure if anyone will have heard of them because they are a bit of a secret. They are an organisation that work alongside the DIT. They're a government organisation. And they don't give money. Please don't think they give money. They don't. What they do is they support you. So let's say that you need a loan because you've got this really big job and it's going to take about £500,000 to get all the work done beforehand, but you have the contract. So they will go with you to your bank, because we have advisors just like me in all of the regions. We have a really great advisor in our region. Usually they're ex-bankers, to be honest, and they'll go with you and speak to the bank and say, look, we are supporting, we are guaranteeing that this guy's got the business, we know he has, but he needs this extra bit of money just to get the thing rolling, and then he'll be paid later. So that's a really good support if you need it. But they also do other things. They do things like bonds, they do insurance, so they can bring up insurance for exporters. Some overseas buyers want insurance before things are sent. That isn't always easy to get in some obscure places, Libya, for example. But sometimes in Europe, they used to be straightforward, and even those are becoming difficult now. So if you want more information about UKEF, always go to your ITA and explain what you're thinking about having it for. And then the ITA will introduce you to any of the advisors who are in the region where you are. And that will be quite useful. Okay, next slide, please. So we've all seen the government website, probably more recently than you might have wanted to, because when you're going in to find out what's happening with Brexit, you'll pop into this website. This website has information. It's an information site. So it's good, it's helpful. I know people could come back to me and said it's really hard trawling through all the information, but it is a mine of information. And your ITA can help you and point you to the points that you do need in there. But it certainly over this last, well, since the Brexit situation, we've had a lot of information come through where we can actually get advice on what to do with exporting things into Europe. Thank you, Robin. This website's fabulous. This is great.gov, and it's much more interactive. So you can get things like a downloadable report on a market. So let's say you're thinking about China. There will be a whole report in there about how to do business in China. So it's got all sorts of information in. It's really interesting. It's certainly worth spending half an hour going through it. But the most important thing is the opportunities, the international opportunities. So you need to probably go into search, because they change this every time. I can't do it because I'm not online. But if you go into search and put international opportunities, you should come into a little blue sign saying opportunities. You click on that and you put in what you sell. So let's make it simple. Let's put in beer. If you put in beer and click find beer, you will get a list of countries that are looking for beer. And you're within that list, you'll see contracts, you'll see whatever it is. Usually it's the DIT office that's putting out that information saying this organisation wants beer. They won't give you the organisation. What they'll ask you to do is apply. And if you apply, you'll then put in details about your company, and then they'll get back to you. However, not everybody sells beer. So if you're selling something that's slightly complicated, you need to test the words, the wording, the phrase with that search engine to see what it brings up, until it brings up something that is as near to what you're selling as is possible. And when you do get it right, then you can register for those notifications to be sent to you. So whenever something comes up selling whatever it is you're selling, or wanting whatever it is you're selling, then that will pop up and tell you. So it's definitely worth going into that site, exploring it for the information it will give you about export, but also testing out how you can find opportunities around the world. And again, always ask your ITA if you've got any queries on that, or you want something chased up a little bit more quickly, then they'll help you with that as well. Next slide, please, Robin. So there's lots of support out there if you're not already aware of it. ITAs I've already talked about. The next two down there, international communication consultants and language communication specialists, we used to have fabulous full-day workshops on things like doing business in Japan, where you'd get to learn a little bit of Japanese business. You get to learn how important the culture is when you're selling over there, and you'd get to talk to people who'd done business in Japan. Sadly, we can't do those at the moment. I do hope they come back because they were so helpful. And culture and understanding culture is one of the biggest ways of doing export properly. You have to understand the culture to the country in which you're selling. It's vital. So market research I've spoken about, digital advisors I've spoken about. The overseas commercial officers are the people in the embassies that I've told you about. They are my colleagues over there. They're the people I go to when I want advice for you on your behalf as a company. UKEF I've spoken about. You all know what the LEPs are. UK and overseas chambers of commerce I've touched on. They again will help us and support us. And I can't read what's at the bottom because this is what's the bottom one? Anyway, whatever's at the bottom.
Oh, sorry. It says it. Oh, it did say. Have I messed that up?
No, yeah, we've gone. It says what?
Overseas business networks.
Right. So overseas business networks are the third party organisations that I was talking about, because they are the people we can also pull in to help you, and they're part of the web that we have where we ask for advice. Okay, next slide, please. So there's no doubt there's a world of opportunity awaits you. So if you've never thought about doing business outside of the UK, there is a lot of opportunity in different countries to do that. And the most important thing is that we're there to help you. Next slide, please. And these are my contact details, my phone number and my email address, should you want to contact me. And that is my presentation finished. I'm now going to pass on to Kerry, who will follow up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathryn. So just when you thought you couldn't have any more from the Department for International Trade, I'm going to spend 5 or 10 minutes telling you about the additional support available from DIT. Thanks very much, Robin. So in 2020, DIT launched the Export Growth Plan. It's actually part of the government's Levelling Up agenda to support companies in the Midlands Engine, so the East and West Midlands, the North, the Northern Powerhouse, and the Southwest, really start to export with confidence, or if they're already exporting, to increase their international footprint. And how they've done this is via the following. They've recruited 64 new international trade advisors, and I'm one of those. And as I mentioned before, I cover Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire. And my colleague Heather Martin covers Lincs, Leicestershire and Northants. Our main role is to work with key intermediaries, for example, the Growth Hub, but also local stakeholders to get the message of international trade out to companies. We also work with smaller businesses as well. So the businesses who are considering exporting, like Kathryn highlighted. So they may not have exported their goods or services internationally before, but they're thinking about it. Or they've just started exporting, but really want their hand holding for the next steps. Or they're a reactive exporter, so they might have serviced a couple of inquiries online, but they haven't got a definitive strategy. Invariably, these companies will turn over up to £500,000. So where I complement Kathryn as an existing ITA is I will work with the very small businesses and to try and get them to start exporting to get those international sales, where Kathryn will work with the larger businesses who have the higher export potential. There are two other parts of the export growth plan which I'm going to speak about. One is the Export Academy and the second one is the Internationalisation Fund. Thanks, Robin. So the Export Academy, it was launched in October 2020 and it's targeted at small to micro businesses. It's to help them get the confidence and the capabilities plus the knowledge to start to trade internationally. However, what I want to say is it's not exclusively for brand new companies. If you're an established exporter and you can attend some of the modules and you can upskill yourself and get the information and training that you actually need. So the webinars are completely free of charge. There's 10 modules in total. And if you want, you can do the whole 10. So if you decide, you know what, I really like the look of these, you just log on, register your interest and then attend accordingly. But if you think, well, actually, I'm only interested in one or two, then you do have the option of pick and mix. You do receive a recording after you've attended, so you can play it back even when you're walking the dog, if you really want to. We're halfway through the first cohort in May, but we are running supplementary cohorts in June, July, and September. We're leaving August out. It's really easy to register. You just click on the website, which is there in front of you now, but also I'll put it in the chat function. And you click on Midlands, put all your details and credentials in, and then pick whichever module or modules you want to attend. Just to give you a highlight of the modules which are running at the moment, we have the benefits and barriers to exporting. So if you're thinking about exporting but you're really not quite sure, that could be a module for you to attend. We have the International Market Research webinar. And what I would say to brand new exporters is this is a really good one to attend way before you probably bring in the services of Kathryn and my colleague, Gary Blackburn, who's our market research advisor. We look at export procedures. So what's involved with moving goods, the key steps, and who the main players are. We look at pricing strategy. So looking at your UK pricing and how this might be different internationally, and also the costs of exporting as well. This is quite a popular one at the moment for obvious reasons. We look at understanding customs procedures, tariffs and excise, and also understanding international commercial terms or Incoterms. So just to give you a flavour, there are 11 international commercial terms, and we go through the main responsibilities of between the buyer and the seller because they change from each Incoterm. A key one for businesses is getting paid. How do I get paid? And looking at the options. So we cover open accounts, bills of exchange, letters of credit, payment in advance, and the advantages and disadvantages of all of those. And finally, we do 2 webinars on selling services overseas. Just a little Wednesday factoid for you is that just under 50% of all UK exports are service-based. I just thought that was a really interesting fact. And just to bring that into D2N2, or Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire, in 2019, £3.5 billion worth of trade was in services. So please don't forget the service sector. Thank you, Robin. The next one is right, I'm going to start again. It's the Internationalisation Fund. It's a real mouthful, so from now on, I'm just going to refer to it as the International Fund. It was launched in 2020, in January 2021 actually, and it's a European fund. There's £38 million in the pot. I have to say here and now, it's not all for High Peak or Derbyshire or Nottinghamshire businesses. It is across England, and we're looking to touch around about 7,600 companies. It's aimed at businesses that meet the European Regional Development Fund, ERDF criteria, the eligibility criteria, and this is really key. And they have significant, really significant potential to grow their international sales. The D2N2, or the Derbyshire intervention rate, is 50%. So that would be a minimum grant of £1,000 on a £2,000 spend ex VAT, up to a maximum of a £9,000 grant. So that's an £18,000 project spend ex VAT. There's one application per business, but it can be multi-activity. So I'm sure a few of you online tonight are thinking, oh, that's quite interesting, Kerry. I'd like a bit of that. What I would say is there is some granular detail, as with all European funding. So a suggestion would be is to link in with your international trade advisor. But to give you a broad overview, what the fund will cover is international market research, but not the OMIS service Kathryn mentioned. But I would really speak again to your ITA about that, because it does cover third parties. We look at IP advice, translation services, especially what Kathryn mentioned earlier with the businesses she's working with, and potentially how you could benefit like they've benefited, international social media and SEO, and wide-ranging consultancy. It is a two-stage process. So there is an EOI at the moment where you can register your interest, but the process is as follows. You work with an ITA. You undertake a diagnostic, and it's an international diagnostic. Then you and your international trade advisor will look at undertaking an export action plan if you've got a suitable project. Then you can apply for the funding. A couple of things. We can't fund certain sectors, and we can't fund certain products or services. So yet again, talk to us. And also, we can't fund any work that is committed or that's anything retrospective. So anything you've committed or paid for, I'm really sorry, we can't even touch that. Thanks, Robin. So for my part, to conclude in regard to the work I do, I and my colleague Heather educate and train new exporters. We help them to deliver a robust export action plan, to be honest. And we help them as they execute that action plan, not just with the introductions within DIT, but also with additional business support organisations, for example, the Growth Hub, MBV, Manufacturing Growth Service, so on and so forth. So that concludes my presentation. If you feel that the services I can offer are of benefit to your company, there's my details at the bottom. I'm more than happy to have a chat with you, and I'm sure Kathryn and myself will be more than happy to take any questions, and hopefully we can answer them.
Thank you, Kathryn and Kerry. Can I share this presentation on our website later? Is that okay? Because it's got all of your contact details on, or not?
Fine by me.
Is that okay, Kathryn?
Yes.
Or would you like to send me an edited version?
Share it as it is.
Okay.
Okay, share it as it is.
Fine. Okay. Thank you. Pete. You need to.
Hi there. Yeah. So at present, we have no questions from our wonderful audience. So, Robin, do you have any thoughts, questions from you? Partly, I asked because of your years of experience working with the DIT.
Sure. Kerry, I think it was you that mentioned 50% of our services are our exports are services. What sort of services are they?
They can be any services, so architectural services, and to be honest, any service you can actually think about, to be perfectly honest. So I'm working with a company at the moment who's an architectural, he offers architectural services and bespoke project management in certain sectors. And he's really looking at penetrating the European market. So he's really keen to work with international commercial officers to get his word out there. So I'm sure Kathryn will have more businesses she's working with in the service sector, but I'd definitely say to people who are considering exporting, definitely look at the Export Academy and the service modules which are on there as well.
So education is a big service, so training, and now of course the virtual proliferation that we have, that has really brought training to the fore, because you can now train virtually, which you didn't used to before, and that's quite a big service, and consultancy of any kind.
And
Okay.
sorry, and hot sectors. What are you finding a rise and fall in? You mentioned the growth of Kathryn, the growth of online, the online space. That might be a particularly hot sector, and I have heard anecdotally that the UK in its online service is several years ahead, let's say, than our European brethren, and even several, and therefore several years ahead of many other countries as well. But what are the hot sectors at the moment to export?
Difficult to say, really. I mean, food and drink will always be a hot sector. In saying that, if you're exporting cheese or animal products, you're in trouble at the moment, because I have a company who's exporting cheese, and he has to pay, and he's doing that through e-commerce. So he's sending a small piece of cheese, and he's been asked to pay £180 vet inspection fee for every piece of cheese. So food and drink is a very popular e-commerce sector, mainly because we have food and drink that people like around the world. Yeah. So people do come to us for stuff that we like. The others vary. It's impossible to say what's more important than another. I've got a lot of clothing companies, and they've done really well through the period of lockdown. And some of them do sports gear, some of them do shoes. So there's always a requirement for anything like that. So the clothing side is quite popular as well.
Can I ask a follow-up on that? What parts of the world are gaining in popularity? I mean, post-Brexit, are we finding there's increased attention in the Americas and Far East and so on? And do the trade deals that have recently been struck, are they having an impact, not least, for example, Turkey prior to Christmas?
The FTAs will eventually kick in. I mean, they are there to make sure that we start looking at other areas more favourably. FTAs don't always kick in straight away. Yeah. So they're being monitored by London quite closely to see which FTAs are having results. And again, that will depend on culture, because Japan culturally takes ages to do business. So even though there's an FTA, it's going to take some time before we see the result of that. The Australian FTA, the Turkish FTA may kick in sooner, because they're easier sort of to deal in. As regards hotspots around the world, again, Australia, China is growing, always has been, hasn't stopped. America could be stalled. America is our biggest trading partner. If we're looking at a list of, America is the top. That could be stalled if Biden doesn't get it sorted out on the trade agreement, because we're waiting for that to come along, and that's very, very important to our ongoing relationship with America. Is a trade agreement down there. Europe is our second biggest trading partner, still is. I suspect it's dropped a little bit. Well, I know it has, but we still do a lot of business with Europe, and certain countries more than others: Germany, Italy, France and Spain. Scandinavia is growing. We do a lot of business with Scandinavia, different countries in Scandinavia. And Korea is an increasing one, because Korea loves things all English. They're great Anglophiles in Korea. And so my company's doing a lot of business and I've got a food and drink company doing really well in Korea at the moment. So, and again, it depends on ease of export. So South America would love to do more business, but Brazil is a nightmare to export to. And some of the South American countries can be a nightmare, but there's always business waiting for you there.
To what extent has the pandemic dampened all trade?
Well, I don't think it's dampened all trade. I think, to be honest, as I said earlier on about people with e-commerce, good e-commerce setups, it's actually, I've had some companies who've had their best year ever.
Yeah.
Because it's accelerated their trade. So if it's been something perhaps in food and drink or something that you can easily send, it's some companies have had the fabulous year. Some companies haven't, but that will go back to, have they got a good website or have they got a product that can be sent around easily?
Well, I suppose that was the point I was getting at, in that it's one thing having a good website, but you have to have the mechanisms to ship the product around the world. And I'd read somewhere that some of those mechanisms, some of the sea freight channels have been challenged through the pandemic. I don't know whether that's the case or not.
No, not really through the pandemic. They've been challenged through the transition. That's where the problems have come. The pandemic hasn't really affected movement because people have been able to move things. As we all know, we've all received things from all around the world. But the big sort of brakes got put on in January when documentation started happening, and that can affect around the world, because if they have to come through Europe or via Europe or even from a dock in Europe, that can cause problems. So I don't think the pandemic has caused as much problems as the transition did.
And the Suez Canal challenge?
Sorry?
The Suez Canal challenge?
I haven't heard anybody. I mean, I had one company who said their stuff was held up.
Right.
Nobody else has said anything major to me.
But have you seen a difference in supply and demand of different products during the pandemic? Because some industries will have slowed right down, whereas some will have just ballooned.
Yeah, as I said earlier on, if you've got a big machine or you're in manufacturing or something like that, they've slowed down. They've probably done more business in the UK than they have abroad. But if you've got things, consumables, so food, drink, clothes, that sort of thing that does well, things that were sold through Amazon. I have a company who sell coffee, the coffee pod holders, and they've done so well, they've actually sold the company. So it depends what it is you're selling and how easy it is to ship it out.
And just to add to that, from the businesses I work with who turn over probably from 20,000 up to 500,000, we're looking at markets quite close to home, the Republic of Ireland, for example. And a lot of my companies who I'm working with have really cut their teeth from e-commerce, but also now are thinking, well, I really want to grow my business, so I'm looking at international. So in some respects, they've had the best year, like Kathryn says, possible, and now they've got their confidence nationally to think about the international side of the business.
And do you bring those businesses together? So we find I support new business starts in Derby, and it's always useful to physically and via the power of Zoom or whatever to connect those businesses so they can share their experiences and so on. Is that part of what you do?
Well, we have export champions. Have you heard of that? So we have export champions, and in fact, one of my companies is an export champion. I met up with her last week, and she told me that she'd been asked to give a talk to companies and also to other export champions about, well, just talk in general, like you said, about exchanging information. So we always facilitated that. Obviously, we've changed it slightly now. So we're facilitating virtual meetings. And usually we like to lead with these export champions because they're not us talking. They're people who work. Jane, who's worked with me, she's worked with me since about 2013. she knows everything service-wise that I've helped her with, and she's able to say, look, Kathryn did this, you could do this, because it helps you attain information about a market or more business in this market. So it's great that we can have those people, because they can talk on a business level.
Sorry, Kerry, do go on.
Sorry, Robbie, I'm just going to add, it's almost like Peter was in one of our training sessions this morning. As part of the Export Academy, what we're going to be looking at to roll out in the next few months is peer-to-peer work and workshops in regard to the Export Academy. So with the new to exporters, after they've gone through the Export Academy, we're looking at virtual roundtables until we're allowed to do so, but so they can learn off one another, and then they get that confidence not just from the webinars and from myself, but also from each other as well. So yes, that's in train, and watch this space, please.
And how much do you get involved in investment overseas? A lot of what we've spoken about today is about trading. What sort of, do you get involved in?
We're not investment. No, that's a different department. Our remit is export. I had a company the other day who asked me if I could help them with importing. They want to import wine. It's not my remit. I can pass them to the people who they can get help from, but we are targeted. We are tasked to get exports, increase exports, help people export, and that's really as far as we go.
Okay, and I suppose that's the same for wider tourism, because when we're generating foreign currency, ultimately, then tourism is a great opportunity. But that would be, I suppose, the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, or is that what tourism falls under?
No, it doesn't fall under us.
No, but it generates foreign currency, is my point.
Okay, yes. But again, it's not something we get unless I've got companies who used to do trips to places. There was someone in Cromford, I think. They used to arrange trips to places and things like that. I would probably get involved with them. But that's, again, it's an export business. It's not tourism per se. It's to do with export and, what they can benefit from.
So question for you both. If we were looking to organise a business expo for Derbyshire, showcasing what Derbyshire has to offer, are you the people to connect with to support that?
What do you mean? So what Derbyshire has to offer?
Well,
surely that would be the companies, wouldn't it? Showing.
Yeah, that's right. So if we were organising the Derbyshire Business Expo,
right,
at which we were looking to promote in Derbyshire our great products, brands to an overseas audience, would we be needing to talk to yourselves?
Well, you probably know most of them. I mean, you already mentioned Thornbridge. They're one of my clients. Peak Ales, they're one of my clients. And I've been to quite a few of the Inspired by Peak District events in the past. So you've got quite a lot. But what would be good is if you said, we've got these, what else have you got?
Yeah. But I'm talking about actually organising for overseas audiences to engage with that virtual expo.
So are we talking, Peter, something like a meet the buyer potentially?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
That's something we can definitely speak about, and that's probably something we'll take offline and have that discussion, and we'll probably bring in the customer services manager into that, a guy called Simon Grandage.
Perfect. So there are plans just starting to be developed for an event this autumn. So it'd be good to touch base with you, Kerry. Any other questions? Yeah. I'm seeing nothing in the chat or in the Q&A boxes. So
well, we have 5 minutes left. If there aren't any more questions, then shall we?
Robin, can I ask, do any of these people participate in? Do they work with an ITA? Do they work with DIT? I know that's difficult to ask when you can't see them, but it would be good.
Let me ask Jim. I mean, I know Jim is one of our board members. Jim, do you do any exporting? Jim runs electric vehicle charging points, and it being very topical, there might be an opportunity there might be an opportunity there for Jim. I mean, that the world needs them. No, is the answer.
And a question from Bob's already been answered, so that's been dealt with.
I did see James, who was on it here earlier, who I mentioned previously, who runs honey. I think it's Honey Spirits, and he manufactures gin and distills gin and brews mead, and he was working, I think, for a French company that did a lot of exporting worldwide. He spent half his time overseas. But he's vanished into a puff of thin air. So, but he's yes, and I think on the back of that, he is now exporting his beverages, which is great. He's got a lot of experience anyway. James has. If there aren't any more questions, then I'd like to thank Kathryn and Kerry ever so much for your presentations. Can you just please keep on the line for a moment while we say thank you to our attendees, and do keep an eye on the Business Peak District website for upcoming webinars. Thank you all for attending, and I shall see you hopefully in person at a Business Peak District or inspired by the Peak District event soon. So thank you everybody for attending, and cheerio.